Before we start, allow me to say that I am deeply saddened by the recent terrible shipwreck off the coast of Italy. They claim that the lives of over 70 people, including several children. I wish to extend my deep felt condolences to the families and friends of those who lost their lives in this tragic event. Sadly, this was not an isolated event. Over the past years, thousands and thousands of people, many of them young children, have lost their lives in an attempt to reach Europe. This tragedy serves a stark reminder that saving lives at sea is not only a legal obligation, but also a humanitarian and moral imperative. These tragedies also serve a brutal reminder of the need to take political action. Moving forward on the Migration Pact and increased external action is imperative. Fighting trafficking and smuggling is a priority. A joint European response is necessary. This is a broad agreement at the Council that we need to adopt effective and lasting solutions to address the immediate and ongoing challenges on all routes, including the central Mediterranean route. In this regard, the European Council recognizes, and I quote, the specificities of maritime borders, including as regards safeguarding lives. It also underlines the need for reinforced cooperation regarding search and rescue activities. Let me now say a few words on some of the main lines of action that the EU is pursuing. We welcome the relaunch of the European Contact Group on Search and Rescue by the European Commission. Several member states are engaged in discussions to set up an enhanced cooperation framework for search and rescue amongst SARS actors, including international humanitarian and maritime organizations. We also need to move forward with the work to partnership with third countries along the routes, increasing capacities in border and asylum management, providing financial support and technical and material assistance is ongoing in many partner countries. This work will continue, and we will step up where it is feasible. In this context, it is important to recall that the effective protection of the Schengen external borders is not contrary to respect for the values and fundamental rights in the EU. Indeed, our frontline member states have not only the right, but also the duty to protect the European borders. This is a common responsibility, and we manage, despite the considerable difficulties and challenges that we faced with. Naturally, in carrying out these duties, Schengen borders codes must be applied in accordance with the European and international law. Honourable members, safe and legal migration is also a central part of our comprehensive approach to migration. With almost 3 million third country nationals migration to the EU every year, the opportunities clearly exist. These legal pathways have the potential to benefit migrants, countries of origin, as well as countries of destination. Legal pathways also contribute towards reducing irregular departures and consequently saving lives at sea. When it comes to those most vulnerable, our member states have shown that they are committed to stepping up their efforts, in particular by way of resettlement. Since 2015, successful EU-sponsored resettlement schemes and humanitarian admissions programs have helped more than 130,000 people in need of international protection to find shelter in our member states. I should also mention the steps forward taken by both co-legislators towards an agreement on the Union Resettlement Framework Regulation. As a result, we will finally be able to move from ad hoc resettlement schemes to a stable framework with greater sustainability and predictability for the protection for those who need. Honourable members, the EU needs a comprehensive migration policy that protects our borders, provides protection to those who in need and prevents the loss of migrants' lives. I outlined today a number of areas on which we are working. It is the combination of these different strands of actions that will ultimately bring about results. Thank you very much for the attention. I'm looking forward to the debate.
Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much, Madam President of the Council. Ylva Johansson, Commissioner, you have the floor.
Imagine you're a woman and all you want is a better life for your child. You think your only choice is to go on a very dangerous journey. Imagine how high the waves, how small the boat, how crowded, how ice-cold the wind, the pouring rain. Imagine the fear, imagine the terror that you might not be saved. And all because you have not found a legal way of coming to the European Union. Since this Parliament put this debate on the agenda, yet another tragedy at sea. 30 people missing, presumed drowned. Behind the numbers, there are people, human beings. Like Shahida Raza, she was 27 years old from Pakistan. She was such a woman. All she wanted was to care for her disabled son, Hassan. She could not come legally, she thought. She's one of the more than 80 people, as far as we know, who died in the waters of Calabria on February 26th. The price of her life, 8,000 euros. The smuggler's fee, blood money. The shipwreck apparently happened when the smugglers steered the vessel onto shallow ground. The smugglers abandoned ship, leaving their passengers to their fate. This tragedy must be a call to action. Our first priority, save lives. Our alternative, safe and legal pathways. Our mission, fight the smugglers who ruthlessly endanger people's lives. We must work relentlessly to bring them to justice, be always one step ahead. Fighting smuggling is central to our action plan on the Central Mediterranean. We must step up the fight as Team Europe with member states. We are building partnerships to fight smuggling, supporting joint investigations between member states and North African partners. I will soon travel to Tunisia, where, as you know, the situation is of concern, to boost our joint fight against smugglers and strengthen our comprehensive migration partnership. And we must do more to prevent irregular departures, stop people getting into smugglers' boats and risking their lives at sea. But we need migration, but in a regular way, safe ways, legal pathways. We must work as Team Europe with countries of origin, transit and destination to manage migration jointly with our partners along the routes, including the Central Mediterranean. To save lives, we also need to work better together. Coordination is at the heart of the new European integrated border management strategy that the Commission adopted yesterday, based on your valuable input from this House. And we relaunched the European Contact Group on Search and Rescue. I welcome the active participation of member states who are now working to improve situational awareness and cooperation at sea. But we need also to give people alternatives to smugglers' boats and trucks. Legal migration for those who want to work. Our societies and economies need skilled labour. Healthcare alone lacks 2 million professionals today. So we are setting up an ambitious new talent pool to help people enter into the EU safely and legally. And we are working on the talent partnerships so people can learn and work in key sectors in member states. And we will provide legal pathways for refugees, safe journeys to safe homes, resettlement and humanitarian corridors for 50,000 people in the next 2 years, supported by at least €500 million. We are linking community sponsorship of refugees to work by supporting companies with a targeted funding call to employ refugees now living in camps and in limbo. We have already successfully adopted the new blue card, And I encourage the co-legislators to make progress and adopt the 2 legislative proposals on the single permit directive and the long-term residence directive. In the letter from President von der Leyen to the leaders, she outlined the key operational actions on migration we are taking already now. She will update the Council on progress next week. All of these policies and operations are important, but will only be truly effective as part of a European migration policy. I am encouraged by the GHA Council last week, where ministers from across the EU committed to adopt the whole pact on migration and asylum during this mandate. I'm encouraged by the Swedish presidency, committed to start trialogues already in June on the central pieces on solidarity and responsibility, including the special category for the search and rescue cases on relocation. And of course, by the progress this House is making, by adopting the mandates on the key pact files, I hope already this month. So let these tragedies at sea remind us. Migration challenges need a European response to save lives, to manage migration, to fight smugglers, to open safe and legal pathways. I am fully aware that you, in this House, already know this. We need to work together to find solutions and to agree on the pact. Thank you.
Merci, Madam Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner.
Is Mr. Linnaeus Sharon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Every death at sea is an unspeakable tragedy. Men, women and children losing their lives in the Mediterranean is truly heartbreaking. And yes, we need, as this debate's title suggests, a common EU response. And it starts by breaking the lucrative business model that smugglers have built at the expense of vulnerable people. We need to fight against these ruthless criminals who put hundreds of people on far too small, unseaworthy vessels in the most difficult of conditions at sea. Thank God, luckily, most people are safe, like the 1,300 people last weekend. But for some, like the more than 70 people that perished off the coast of Calabria, help tragically came too late. We need a fundamental change of policy. No matter how many search and rescue operations are deployed at sea, if hundreds of thousands of people continue to embark on this dangerous journey, help will never be able to reach all of them on time. Arrivals by sea in Italy have increased 3 times compared to last year. It means the risk of accidents has also tripled. So we need a common but also a holistic approach. No oversimplification of complex challenges by focusing on one solution only. Most asylum seekers arriving in Europe are not in need of international protection, and they will most likely continue to risk their lives to come here irregularly, regardless of the legal pathways we put in place for those who need it, at least until we change the automatism that paying a smuggler equals entry to the territory of the European Union. Changing that needs to be the core of the policy Europe finally adopts, because there is no silver bullet. Fighting smugglers, creating pathways, code of conduct for search and rescue, strengthening external borders, discouraging illegal migrations, improving cooperation with third countries, increasing returns. These are all intertwined. They're all part of the same puzzle. And we need to complete this whole puzzle. We need to adopt the Migration Pact in full if we want to make debates like the one today a thing of the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unsere nächste Rednerin.
Our next speaker is the President of the S&D.
8 años.
Thank you, President. 8 years after the humanitarian crisis of 2015, the European Union has still not come up with a solution to this most divisive common challenge facing us all today. The ship going down in Calabria, off Calabria, because of Maloney's attitude and non-action, robberies and assaults by Greek border guards. These are the latest episodes in our shameful policy. The governments of Italy and Greece and the Commission are obliged to not just investigate these circumstances, but to come up with measures that prevent this kind of abuse. In the 10 years that have elapsed between the tragedies of Lampedusa and Calabria, more than 23,000 people have died in the Mediterranean. These are years of frustrated negotiations, of blockage. And now, instead of making progress towards coming up with a new migration and asylum pact, the right wing prefers to debate on whether to build walls at our external borders in Europe and who should pay for them. It's been shown that the worst kind of walls are the walls in the minds of the right wing. This is a step back towards the reactionary, exclusive form of Europe, a view that tends to oppress knowledge and foster selfishness. We need to recover the dignity of Europe. The idea of walls is a false, magic sort of approach by ultra-nationalists who wish to present foreigners as a threat, dividing us. And the many asylum requests presented last year also show that there can be no wall that will prevent people trying to flee disasters and persecution. Walls against this will not do away with humans' survival instinct. It would just be a matter of increasing illegal migration and enriching the gangs, the people smugglers. This phenomenon can't be managed through false, inefficient measures. We need an integral policy based on solidarity and shared responsibilities, as is contained in the draft new Migration and Asylum Pact, which gives rights to refugees, favours the integration of refugees and fosters the use of legal routes for integration of refugees, including visas, employment, humanitarian visas. So this is a challenge to Europe, not just vis-à-vis a specific policy, but in regard to our actual foundational values. Thank you.
Ms. Intveld Sophia, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the Commissioner for her words. I think as a Parliament we should endorse your course, your line of action. You said, Commissioner, imagine you are one of those people. And I think this is where the problem begins. We have dehumanized those people. We cannot imagine anymore what it feels like because we have dehumanized them. It always strikes me how we are talking about an amount of migrants rather than a number of migrants. A number of migrants is about individuals. Let's start and go back to our humanity and think of them as people. I entirely agree with my EPP colleague who said no oversimplification of complex problems. That is why I have a bit of difficulty understanding why the EPP is always coming up with fake simplified solutions like walls around Europe. It doesn't work, okay? Yeah. It may work in an electoral campaign, but it doesn't work at all in solving the problem. The Renew Group has written to the European Council and called for swift action, because we do think that the GHA Council now has to move. Yes, we are working on the pact. It's very difficult, but we hope we will get there. But that is not going to solve the problem today. The people who are getting on boats today need to be helped, and that is why we need sufficient and adequate rescue capacity organised by the Member States and the European Union. Thank you.
Danke, Herr Kollege.
Thank you. Mr. Eric Marquardt is the next speaker.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Yes, thank you very much, President. I think that some people are right. The smugglers may be evil people, and for the wrong motivations, they send people on a very dangerous route and people die as a result. But we're not here because of the smugglers being bad people. We're here because people in distress at sea have not been rescued when they could have been. That happened on Saturday, 2 a.m. in the morning. Distress calls were put out, and no one came to help. For 30 hours, no assistance was sent in international waters. The Irene mission could have been there. NGOs could have been there. The merchant vessels could have been there and saved these people, but no one was told or given the task of rescuing those people. And if we take things seriously, that the dignity of individuals is inalienable. We cannot just blame the smugglers before the bodies are buried, always saying that other people are to blame. We need to take the core of the debate seriously. If someone is in distress at sea, let us send rescue boats and rescue these people for whatever reason they're in distress. And the fact that that doesn't happen is a shame for Europe. We should be ashamed. We shouldn't just stick to fine words. We need to start acting. Otherwise, we will have to assume that future generations will consider us bad people. Thank you, Mr. Vincenzo. Sofo is next.
Tragedia di Cutro abbiamo
On the tragedy of Cutro, we've seen what's happened. What's with the left? They've accused Prime Minister Meloni of having blood on her hands. We've seen hundreds of thousands of people who are victims of people smugglers, and seen what's happened as they get shoved onto boats which are likely to sink. But the hope that they are going to be able to count on the help of NGOs when they founder at sea. Of course, borders, we have border instruments to try and help, but they don't go far enough. And we've seen what's happened with Frontex. If we think about the moral responsibilities of the tragedies, well, we could debate that at length, but our duty is to think about urgent solutions for uncontrollable migratory flows. These are solutions which the Commission is finally beginning to see. They've taken up our request to strengthen Frontex and to carry out more robust returns. There will be the upcoming reform of the Dublin as well, and that's something that we'll be looking at when it comes up. And so we need, I think, as well to try and strengthen our external borders so that it's not just about redistributing those that manage to survive the trip at sea, but also to try and dissuade them from taking to the boats in the first place. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Annalisa Tardino is the next speaker.
La sinistra in questo
The left in this parliament and outside continues to seek scapegoats for the deaths at sea, and they've even accused Prime Minister Meloni and Deputy Prime Minister Salvini and the Italian Coast Guard, and rather than accepting that they are involved in saving people. But no one thought of blaming Sanchez for the Melilla tragedy. And the parties to blame are the people smugglers and the do-gooders, and it is our duty, your duty, to stop the people traffickers, as the Pope has said. That is what our political energy should be directed at. We should be absolutely firm and show no indulgence towards these criminals, and we hope that at the next Council, Europe will put forward positive actions to combat traffickers, stop deaths at sea and protect our borders. The Cutro tragedy is just symbolic of a tragedy which has gone on for a number of years. And we need to stop this at the root. And good politics means taking responsibility for making decisions rather than passing the buck to countries such as Italy. Thank you. Malin Björk is next.
Kommissionär, ordförande, 26 000 människor har drunknat I Medelhavet sedan 2000.
Thank you very much. 26,000 people have died in the Mediterranean since 2014. If we realise this, then we also have to realise that we need a response. We need to have more efforts in to save lives. However, governments are continuing to misuse solidarity, and we can't accept this. So what does the Commission intend to do? What does the Presidency intend to do to avoid this, to stop people from drowning? The model used by people traffickers focuses on people who have no other alternative. We have to act, but we don't have enough posts available. We need to see more work, more effort from member states. These dangerous journeys will continue because people are being forced to leave their homes in countries like Afghanistan, Iran, and Syria. So we are very clear. We don't want borders to be closed off with walls. This is not the correct response. We have to see coordinated efforts from the European Union. We have to provide aid and support. Today, all of these efforts are focused on controlling borders. We're seeing an increase in mortality by these dangerous ways to access Europe. We need to see more solidarity to save lives.
Sarah, the floor is yours.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. The Mediterranean always seems to be more similar now to a watery cemetery. 26,000 dead since 2015. And there is that lack of legal pathways to the European Union. They come to the European Union fleeing from conflict, fleeing from strife. It's clear that saving lives at sea is an obligation, moral and legal, for all member states of the European Union. Search and rescue has to be the job of everybody, not just the coastal countries. All member states of the European Union have to display humanity. With a Minister of Internal Affairs in Italy who has been accused of lack of sensitivity and a lack of understanding for these people, a government which has displayed huge inhumanity.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, werte Kommissarin, verehrte Ratspräsidentin.
Thank you very much. It is clear, whether it's national, international, or European, it's an obligation. But these dangerous journeys are the consequence, not the cause. It's right that the presidency is focusing on cooperation with countries of origin and transit. We need to improve conditions there on the ground. We need to combat criminal networks and this very cynical business model. It's not easy to bring three institutions together in 27 member states. We all know that. But we will be judged on whether we are able to contribute to handling the situation and whether we're able to end the situation. The pact it will not be a miracle, but it will be able to increase confidence. And what we've seen in the past few weeks is a common approach by the EU has its effect. And the proposal on legal ways could perhaps be the best way. In 2021, I had a very similar speech, and it's good that we're talking about this. But this year we need to deliver. Given the increased, we need more Europe now, and this is urgent. Therefore, I call on you, and perhaps especially this week, It was too easy in the past to criticise the Council. Now we also need to deliver. What we do not have is time. Thank you.
Danke, Frau Kollegin.
Well, thank you very much, colleague. Then now, Madam Elisabetta Gioimini now has the floor.
Commissioner, we very much hope to see an asylum and migration pact in order to see some effective solidarity. We all hope to see that. However, quite honestly, I'm quite tired of hearing Europe always be blamed, because I have never seen an extreme right government asking for European competencies to be strengthened when it comes to migration, whereas I've seen plenty of left governments, ask for more money for building walls. And if you look at Salvini and Meloni, they repeat nativist slogans against migrants, neo-colonial slogans, send them all back home, slogans saying that migrants are coming to Europe to try to substitute European people, racist slogans. And facing these tragedies of innocent people, what do? We hear people saying that Europe isn't doing enough. Well, that's all very easy. They can create a new crime, say they're going to hunt out these traffickers across the waters all around the world. But what about supporting the Coast Guard when actually the state itself who has raised obstacles to saving people at sea? This itself is a crime, just like the traffickers are committing a crime. And then finally, we see them singing karaoke songs for Salvini's birthday, and they don't even care that people are dying. Please, if you care about Italy, stop bringing shame upon us and take your responsibility.
Madame Fabienne Keller, the floor is yours.
Monsieur le Président, cher Otmarka.
Thank you very much, President, Ms. Johansson, Commission, and Minister Jessica Rosval. The shipwreck at near Cotro in Italy is shocking for all of us, precisely because this boat sank in European waters, not high seas, but this boat was reported to the Italian Coast Guard. More than 60 people died, and 2,300 in the Mediterranean last year. We cannot turn away from this crisis. With my Renew colleagues, we're calling for a sea rescue mission at European level, and we need to have legal ways of migration as well. In the medium and long term, our response is the Asylum and Migration Pact, which allows us to provide harmonised asylum rules in the European Union and a solidarity mechanism for member states. Time is running out. I call on the Council, the Commission, please, we need to accelerate our work so that we're able to make progress on this reform that we've been waiting for a long time. Thank you very much.
Merci, Madame. Frau Kollegin Tineke-Strick.
Madam Tineke-Strick, please, has the floor.
Council Commissioner, the Mediterranean Sea is the deadliest migration route in the world. And this is not a law by nature. It's caused by mankind. By the political decision to ignore search and rescue obligations, shift responsibility to the Libyan Coast Guard, obstruct the work of NGOs saving lives. This is a policy of deliberate disengagement, a lack of solidarity and a shameless evasion of one's own obligations. And the response to every tragedy is giving more boats to the Libyan Coast Guard, meaning more people contained in hell. But where are the genuine life jackets? Where is an EU coordinated search and rescue mechanism? Where is the mandatory relocation for rescued asylum seekers? Where is the protection for humanitarian workers? And where are the safe and legal migration routes? Where is the display of humanity? So Council and Commission, stop this deadly tactic of looking away and fencing off, and hold up the fundament of the EU, namely our values. Thank you.
Danke, Herr Kollege Herrmann.
Well, Thank you very much. Herman Terch, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Cierto, toda muerte en el...
Death at sea is a drama, but many of these tragedies are avoidable, and some are part of that major trafficking operation towards Europe. So nations have to protect their borders. We need controlled migration. Otherwise, we have people just going out at sea and leaving their lives to the fate of traffickers. It's not only criminal circles and organizations that profit from all of this. Their collaborators are a number of different humanitarian organizations which are manipulated by the far left, some of you here actually, and they are part of this human trafficking operation, leaving people at sea. It's a kind of, if you like, element that is related to the slave trade of centuries past. So it is all part of a cycle of violence, all of this in order to get cheap labor. If you want to stop death at sea, well, Giorgia Meloni shows us the path. She shows us the path, and that means prison for traffickers and getting rid of this entire scourge altogether with proper legislation.
The floor is yours.
Voorzitter, collega's, in 2022 rapporteerde...
Colleagues, in 2022, Frontex flagged up over 330 illegal crossings towards Europe, and 90% of those involved traffickers. Once people have got to Europe, they can enjoy the social security that we've created, that's paid for by our taxpayers, without having to have contributed to it themselves. All they have to do is ask for asylum. These aren't real refugees. They're just people coming to seek their fortune over here. And yet, what does Europe do to protect people from here? Nothing, quite the opposite. We make life easier for people to cross to Europe. We need an alternative to this illegal policy. Anyone who comes illegally to Europe should lose all rights to asylum and should have a lifetime ban of coming to Europe. The right to asylum doesn't mean they have a right to reside. We should ensure that when we welcome them, we respect the rules.
The floor is yours.
Konstantinos Arvanitis, you have the floor. I couldn't disagree with what you said, Madam Johansson. Under any circumstance whatsoever, however, we here see that we have two Europes. One Europe which doesn't understand, and one which realizes what the situation is. Speaking about Italy, about that shipwreck, weren't we speaking about Kythira, that island, that shipwreck there? Just 2 months ago, boats leaving from Izmir, from Turkey, and then crashing upon the rocks on Kythira, on that island in Greece. Didn't anybody see them? Didn't Frontex see them? Didn't anybody see them at all, the Coast Guard? So I think we've seen numerous cases like this from January until June of 2022. An average of 5 people die a day trying to cross our seas, the Mediterranean Sea. According to the UNHCR, the total number of dead or missing in the Mediterranean in 2022 is more than 1,200. And international law, what it says, well, we've been talking about it for years, that we need safe passage and we need legal migration. We agree absolutely with you. Does the right agree with you? As well, it appears that they don't seem to understand. We have, on many occasions, traffickers right under our noses, right under the noses of national authorities, under the nose of Frontex as well. That's why I mentioned the case of Kythira. Now, the words of Madam Metsola. Madam Metsola said the other day, it was a wonderful speech, she said, we are the generation of politicians who cannot ignore this reality. Well, let's not just describe the situation, let's legislate, because we have a very serious situation here. So to close, incorporation, relocation, and of course, safe pathways. Thank you.
Merci. Monsieur Nicolas Bay.
Mr. Nicolas Bay, please. Colleagues, While the United Kingdom is finally announcing firm measures to fight illegal immigration, while Italy is predicting an invasion in Europe, it needs to do all it can to protect its borders, while NGOs are accomplices of human traffickers, while your delays, your lax approach, your cowardice are responsible for deaths on the sea. You want to go further and further. The same causes produce the same effect. The same words of openness and welcome push more and more migrants to leave and sometimes die at sea. If you had a little bit of humanity, real humanity, you would dissuade them from leaving. So stop trying to project that there is an El Dorado which does not exist. Stop encouraging them to come to Europe and risk their lives. You are pushing them into the hands of mafias, of traffickers. You are uprooting them far from their families and their countries. Real humanity is being firm on migration. Your lax approach is shameful, and and you're guilty because of that.
Our next speaker is Madame Alessandra Mussolini.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you, President. I had one speech prepared of a minute, but I'm going to make another speech. 1 minute speech. It's shameful. It's shameful to hear from Italians who are using deaths to speak out against a government. The Cutro tragedy is not an Italian tragedy. It's a European tragedy. And the solutions have to be European. Why do we never talk about the children who disappear and other things that happen in Italy? Do you understand how complicated it is? Italy doesn't leave anyone on their own. No one in Europe can permit themselves to leave Italy on its own either. 60,000 migrants have been saved by the Coast Guard. And who's doing that? We're talking about increases of 250% from Tunisia and Libya and from around Turkey. And we have to talk about this. We can't just draw a veil over this, over a member state that deserves to be helped from all of us. We are Europe. It's not that you have Italy on one side and Europe on the other. So what I'm hearing here is, honestly, it's shameful. You're not honouring and respecting the thousands of victims, the sacrifice of human life. These are something that we are all responsible for. We have to respect them, but you on the left don't do so. It's as if I'm saying NGOs are exploiting human lives and migrants. Is that not right?
Grazie, Monsieur Lopez Aguilar.
Thank you. Mr. Lopez Aguilar, please.
Vielen Dank, President Carras.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. This is the 5th debate in the European Parliament about deaths at sea in the European Union, and the call for a mechanism, search and rescue mechanism, and this last shipwreck near Crotone in Calabria, there were 200 people on board that boat, over 200 people, and Frontex had informed fishing vessels near that boat that what was happening. But the government of Giorgia Meloni has made the lives of NGOs impossible. The consequence is that nobody intervened, neither a fishing vessel nor the Coast Guard of the Italian authorities. Nobody could help to save those individuals in distress. Of all those victims, 18 were children. 26,000 deaths in the Mediterranean in these last years, from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, you name it. Individuals who have been tortured, individuals who were trying to find their way. Nothing has been done for them. We need solidarity, effective solidarity, and we need to work. We need to have binding systems in place to allow for safe pathways. We need a proper mechanism right now. This European Parliament cannot stop, cannot rest until all the member states abide to some sort of system to save these individuals. We need a European mechanism for search and rescue, and we need European humanitarian visas for these individuals. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, President. Colleagues, obviously, it is the state's job to rescue people, and we have spent too long leaving this to NGOs. It was very dramatic what we've seen in Mediterranean, and it's even more dramatic because it took place in European waters, in Italian waters. But, colleagues, what we really need is not just a solution for sea rescue, where we do need a solution, and what we need is to take a big step, because in the we're going to vote in the committee this month on all of the migration files, and so that we can deliver, and so that citizens can get what they expect, that is, finally a solution on the migration issue, so that there are European responses to this issue. The Council needs to get the Member States moving, and everyone always tries to reach the maximum in their positions. No, everyone needs to be prepared to compromise. For crises, we need a solution for the successor to Dublin, and we need to do this because if we don't have proposals which we can negotiate on in order to be able to legislate, colleagues, then citizens will rightly say you didn't manage to do anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now the floor goes to Madam Grace O'Sullivan.
Colleagues, in the late 1980s, I first saw someone drowning at sea. I was a crew member on board a Greenpeace ship, and we were on a campaign in the Mediterranean Sea just off Mallorca. People often think of the Mediterranean as a calm sea, but that night a ferocious storm was raging when we answered a Mayday call. A sailing boat was going down in extremely rough conditions. We did everything we could, hauling the crew on board as the boat was sinking before our very eyes. 2 made it, 2 did not. Saving lives at sea is a duty, and Europe is failing to uphold that duty by closing legal pathways, with illegal pushbacks, by persecuting humanitarians. The distress calls are still coming in. It's time that we answer them. It's time we answer them now. Thank you.
Monsieur Carlo Fidanza.
Grazie, Presidente.
Well, thank you very much, President, Minister. During these days, we've seen a terrible defamatory campaign against the government of Italy, saying that the government is totally impassive. Asleep at night is what people have said on the left as well. Now, the death of so many desperate people, how do you sleep at night is what has been said. That the fight against traffickers, how do you sleep at night if you don't fight against traffickers? Yesterday, you'll have heard about what has been done by the Spanish government. How do you sleep at night? Many, many years, nothing has been done against trafficking and traffickers. How do you sleep at night? I ask legislators in the European Parliament. I ask all these hypocrites everywhere. How do you sleep at night without having done something against trafficking?
Prenez enfin vos responsabilités.
Let's face up to our responsibilities. It's because you're encouraging migrants to carry out these dangerous clandestine crossings that they're dying at sea. You're constantly calling for immigration. You support the principle of non-return. You provide assurances to clandestine migrants that they will never be sent back to their countries. And yet 90% of homeless people in France are not cared for, and yet NGOs are complicit in all of this. This is all your responsibility. The only way to prevent these deaths is to ensure that migrants understand that they should not be tempted to undertake the crossing. We won't take them in. That's what Australia did in 2015 and reduced the number of deaths at sea to 0. That's what the United Kingdom wants to do and what pushed the Brits to Brexit. And it's the only way to deal with it, to stop people from risking their lives. It's the only way to prevent the planned disappearance of our civilization under this wave of migrants.
Danke. Merci.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moyton, please.
Herr Präsident, Frau Kommissarin, werte Kollegen.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Obviously, we're seeing more and more terrible tragedies in the Mediterranean. Thousands of people on the dangerous route to Europe have lost their lives. If we want to talk about sea rescue, we say it's not a solution. No, it's part of the problem. It's partly responsible. Every activist who sees themselves as a rescuer in the Mediterranean does the same things as the lobby and the traffickers, because desperate people are coming from the Middle East and Africa to come to Europe illegally, and they are risking their lives across the sea. You have the full responsibility for this human suffering at our external borders. And I would like to say, with this lethal practice, we need to bring this lethal practice to an end. We can only have one message from the EU, and that is illegal migration in the EU has no chance. It is not tolerated, and only by doing that will we strengthen our external borders and will we combat the trafficking mafias, and we will stop people from drowning.
Okay, please, Karin Melchior.
This is a repetitive debate, and last time we had it in this very chamber, we were discussing whether rescues of lives at sea encourages people to travel and seek refuge in Europe. Barry Andrews, my colleague from Renew, said that there is evidence that this is not the case. Do you have evidence for your claim that you just made, that rescue at sea encourages people to travel across the Mediterranean?
Well, it is quite clear. If they have the opportunity to come to Europe this way, they will do it. It's just evidence, nothing else. So it's quite easy. If there is no more chance to come in this way, they won't do it anymore. That's the Australian way, you know. And that would be a solution, that not so many people must die in the Mediterranean as they do at the time. So we must change this by saying, no, not this way. I'm not at all against legal kind of migration, but not in an illegal way which leads people directly into death by drowning.
Our next speaker is Monsieur Salvatore De Meo.
Grazie, Presidente. Durante la plenaria...
Thank you very much. During the November plenary here in this room, I and other colleagues with the Council and Commission here, the proposal was presented about trafficking of human beings, death at sea, and safe pathways. So there's, of course, our particular position. It was very, very clear, and the Parliament repeatedly has expressed that there's a need for orderly migration. This is an issue which has become dramatically even more important. We have to find some sort of joint solution. Now, my question is, how many more times are we going to have to discuss this? How many more deaths are we going to have to see? The Cutro shipwreck showed once again that, unfortunately, Italy became the stage of a tragedy. But it is not an Italian tragedy. It is a European tragedy. There's not a migratory emergency in Italy. There's a migratory emergency throughout Europe. So the issue of migration ought to be put on the top of the next Council agenda. Italy cannot be left alone. We need a united Europe which will act in solidarity in a concerted fashion. Trafficking of human beings has to be dealt with effectively. Finally, we have to also have legal pathways, deal with the countries of origin, deal with the place of disembarkation as well in an effective fashion. But Europe has to work together. Otherwise, it will be negligent.
Thank you very much, President. President of the Council and colleagues from the EPP. Women, men and children who are risking their lives to cross the Mediterranean, knowing that so many people die there, are doing so in utter desperation to be able to escape from hunger, war, ethnic and religious persecution in their home countries. Mr. Mussolini from the EPP in particular, I'd say that restricting rescue operations in the Mediterranean and limiting NGOs is the opposite of what we should do, and what your government should do. What is doing is inhumane. You need to stop traffickers. It's not NGOs that are exploiting lives. They save lives. And they need to save people who are risking their lives because of desperation. Obviously, European solidarity is very important as well. But the ministers you should stop doing Italian propaganda.
Merci, Madame Abir Al-Saladi.
Herr talman. Ja, det är ett europeiskt misslyckande att vi står.
Thank you, President. Yes, this is a failure for Europe. The fact that once again today, we're having to talk about this today as people are dying in the Mediterranean, when all they're looking for is security and a better future. This is a failure for the EU. Today, I would like to address Giorgia Meloni, who during her election campaign declared that as a woman and a Christian, her heart was burning for Italian values. Is it possible in a Christian and a mother's heart, is there any room for people who are looking for protection, who are fleeing their backgrounds? No, apparently not. 10 years ago, when the Lampedusa disaster happened, when children's tiny bodies were washing up on beaches, then we all said this should never happen again. We saw the body of a Kurdish child and we all said never again. And yet here we are yet again. Ibrahim Salim was 3 years old. Madina Hassini was 6 years old. Alan Kurdi was 2 years old. These children all drowned. Thousands of people are dying, and this is a failure for Europe.
Our next speaker is Herr Bernhard Zimniok. No, Herr Ross Robert. No, yes, Ross Robert. Okay, excuse me.
In dit debat wordt telkens een valse tegenstelling geplaatst. Alsof het hardvochtig zou zijn om grensbescherming te willen.
So it's as if wanting to have border control has been seen as something shameful. But the massive smuggling of individuals, that has been the result. Borders are necessary for the welfare and security of people in our member states. And massive human trafficking is a terrible crime. These people getting onto the boats, hoping that NGOs will help them somewhere along the way, hope thereafter that they'll end up in Europe. Frontex has to protect the borders. Now, asylum applicants can conduct those in third countries. Those who are going to come illegally to Europe will be sent back. That has to be the policy that we adopt, that will protect our member states, member states will save lives as well, and will stop illegal, irregular migration. It is no solution to the problem allowing these people into the country and providing for them thereafter.
Excuse me for the irritation before. Nun ist Herr Bernhard Zimniok am Wort.
Now it's Mr. Zimniok who has the floor. Thank you very much, President. Once again, we're seeing migrants drowning in the Mediterranean, and it's very clear that the EU is to blame, because the EU is not combating this mass migration, and you support these private sea rescuers, and then you're providing assistance to criminal traffickers, and the EU is giving incentives to migrations to reduce the death figures to zero. Would be possible if we ban these private traffickers and to have state sea rescue, which drives all boats back and takes people back to their countries of origin. But if we want to reduce the death figures to zero, this is the only way. All of the other things literally are about your crude ideology of open borders, and we will see more hundreds and thousands of people dying, and you are the ones to blame. Thank you.
Ich darf recht herzlich zu
now, Madam McGuinness, I'd like to welcome you at this particular point to this agenda point that we're on. And our next speaker is colleague Rivière.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. If reality wasn't so tragic, if so many people hadn't drowned in this dangerous crossing, it would be almost funny that we are once again in this surreal discussion of these facts being repeated. France allows tens or hundreds of thousands of migrants believe that they, including illegal migrants, will think that they'll be able to find houses and jobs when they come over here. The EU and some member states are continuing to subsidize NGOs, which they themselves act as traffickers. European countries are drowning in migration, and they can't continue like this unless they're going to undermine their own citizens' security, particularly the most vulnerable. Europe has to give more means to Frontex and give them the clear message that when it comes to these boats, they have to accompany them back to where they came from in order to avoid these terrible human tragedies.
Merci, Madame Sylvie Goulon.
Thank you. Ms. Sylvie Goulon, please. Thank you very much, President. At the beginning, I wanted to express my disappointment that the EU has not been able to find a solution on legal ways of migration. And I've heard that we're talking about people now, so there is a little bit of hope. We have managed to have the temporary protection directive, so 20 years after it was adopted. Now, could we actually have a European rescue mechanism? Be several advantages to this. Now, it would help to avoid the tragedies we've seen in the Mediterranean and elsewhere. Then we could welcome people in dignity. In parallel, we should also have legal ways for people to migrate. And I think in this way, Europe would actually grow from this. Thank you. Thank you very much. Nicola Danti, please.
Grazie, signor Presidente, signora Commissaria, signora Ministro.
Thank you very much, colleagues. For once again, for the upteenth time, we have those terrible images before our eyes of what took place in Cutro. Women, small children, coming to Europe with hope. This particular shipwreck once again reveals a very, very dark side. Not all because of the law enforcement authorities. There are clear decisional responsibilities. The Italian government has not been able to provide solutions. It has not been able to resolve this particular situation. Why? Why would a mother and father take a child on such a dangerous journey? Questions like that come to mind as well. What is the source of this particular situation? Then the European Union, what sort of mechanisms are in place? What sort of mechanisms are necessary? Because it's quite clear that the day after the response is the same. Let's wait. But when we wait, it is always too late. Thank you.
Monsieur Bruczynski, Joachim Stanislav, the floor is yours.
Dziękuję. Szanowni Państwo, powiedzmy sobie szczerze i bez owijania.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, quite honestly, we have to tell the truth. If we don't want to continue seeing these dreadful images of dead women and men and children on our Mediterranean beaches, we can't allow them, we can't continue to put dreams in these people's heads by convincing them that if they come here to Europe, they will meet everything that's been promised to them. For centuries, wars and famines and awful circumstances have pushed people to migrate. And yet today we have another scourge. That scourge is called Putin. We know that the Wagner Group has used migrants as weapons against the European Union and has pushed them to cross borders, for example, the Polish border. We have to if you want to continue with tragedies, then just keep on doing what you're doing.
But he was here, but I cannot see him at the moment. Is Mr. Hakrainen Deuvo here? No, so we come to the next speaker, Balázs Hidvegi. What? No. Speaker. I asked only for the next speaker, but not to you. Mr. Deuvo Hakkarainen.
He's not here. So he's absent. So
he's not here. Hidvegi, Balázs.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. The shipwrecks on the Mediterranean are heartbreaking human tragedies. Blaming the legitimate border protection efforts of member states, however, is a very dishonest and a completely wrong approach. The underlying reason for these tragic events, in reality, is the European indulgence and lack of sanction concerning illegal entries into the Union. It is the pro-migration statements, the quotas, and the impunity for NGOs that cooperate with criminals, smugglers, that cause these deaths. Italy faces the continuous arrival of more and more ships, with an estimated 650,000 people set to leave Africa just this year, as forecast by intelligence services. It is European migration policy that must be placed on a completely new footing in order to avoid more human tragedies at sea. To stop the vicious circle, the first thing to do is to start protecting Europe's borders so that there would be no point for smugglers and migrants to even begin their dangerous journey. Also, all illegally arrived migrants in Europe who have no right to stay must be transported back home. Unless we do these things, there will be no end to the tragedies that we have witnessed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pedro Bartolo.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President. The images of cadavers on the coast of Cutro and the boat sinking coming from Libya causes great turbulence in me indeed. We had those 380 dead that washed up on our shores not long ago. All of this is a Europe which cannot manage its migratory waves. It's shameful, deeply shameful. We cannot let bureaucratic procedure and poor management lead to the loss of lives. We need the humanity of policy. We need to have systems in place where there's fundamental respect as well. Remember, your children, your nephews, your nieces, your grandchildren, just understand that we have to work together as Parliament, as Council, as Commission as well. Everything has to be negotiated, can be negotiated, but not life and not fundamental values. Thank you.
Ms. Alcita Kanko, the floor is yours.
I will speak in Dutch. Ik heb aandachtig naar de toespraak.
I listened very closely to what Ms. Johansson was saying in her presentation, and I think that it's full of good intentions, but these don't lead us anywhere. 5 days ago, 14 people drowned just off the Tunisian coast. That's 2 weeks after what happened in Italy. There wasn't any particular we're getting used to the fact that there isn't much support from the Commission. Currently, there are 2,400 people who are blocked in reception facilities. Is this humane? I'm happy to hear that Ms. Johansson will go to Tunisia, but she must not come back empty-handed. Because we need to destroy the trafficking networks before they destroy the lives of other people. Thank you.
Much. Monsieur Dino Chiaruso.
L'Italia, I meravigliosi mari italiani.
Italy, beautiful seas of Italy have turned into a watery grave for women and children. We've seen that once again in Cutro, and the Italian government wasn't able to save the lives of children and their parents. They have been accused. These individuals who have died have been accused, and they have been their destiny has been their own making. This is totally shameful. It is not only the responsibility of Italy, but of all Europeans. With Dublin II, it was quite clear that there were great problems that exist there, and that all European Union countries have to work together in order to fight effectively, to work effectively in order to provide at least the bare minimum for these individuals. So, indeed, everybody has to assume responsibility. And those people who are getting money to take these people across the seas, it has to be understood that this particular phenomenon has to be fought as well. If we don't work in a concerted fashion and effectively, these waters will continue to be a cemetery for many.
Dank u, voorzitter, commissaris.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, representatives of the Council, colleagues. Topakay Amakel was an Afghan journalist, a pleasant woman, committed, and who loved her job. However, she hadn't been able to do her job since the Taliban came to power. She only had one option: to flee to Europe. 2 weeks ago, she drowned off the coast of Calabria. Topakay is one of 5 members of her family who died at the same time, one of the tens of people who have disappeared in the waves, one of 26,000 people who have died in the Mediterranean since 2014. Topakay died because the European Union did not create safe routes, because Italy has undermined the work of NGOs that are doing the work that Italy doesn't want to do. It doesn't want to take its responsibility. Behind each number is a story. And as long as EU policy tries only to prevent refugees from coming in, then new stories will be added to hers. We'll have new stories to tell until heads of state and government finally transform their hollow condolences into actions in order to ensure real solidarity from Europe.
Thank you. Charlie Weimers, please.
Tack, herr talman. Än en gång.
Thank you very much, President. Once again, for the fifth time, we're talking about tragic deaths at sea between Africa and Europe. We need to tell the truth. Migrants by boat will continue to die as long as the EU continues with this policy. In recent years, in Bangladesh, the population has grown to more than 40 million in 20 years, 80 million in Pakistan. How can we deal with such migration pressure? Because many people come from these countries. We need to face the truth. In Australia, you can see how things can be done. The only thing that will stop deaths is to take another approach. Otherwise, we'd have completely open borders. Is that what really you stand for?
Frau Carina Olsen.
Thank you very much. Carina Olsen, please.
Talman, kommissionär. För varje båt som förliser på Medelhavet innebär det att fler föräldrar aldrig kommer att få se sina barn leva.
Well, all of this means that these people, these parents will not see their children again, those who died. Let's not forget that these are families that are torn apart. Let's not forget that these individuals who perished have families elsewhere as well. These people have risked their lives because there are no legal pathways to Europe, and it will continue as such. The destiny of these individuals will be thrown into the clutches of traffickers if we don't have a system in place, pathways in other words. We have to also stop pushing the buck somewhere out there to somebody else. We are responsible. We need a long-term sustainable migration policy. The right to asylum has to be there for people. We have a responsibility towards all these people.
I accept one blue card from the ECR, Bogdan Ronczka.
Madam, please decant, because my speech will be on Polish language. Hand pause, please. Take. Okay, thank you. Otóż chciałem pani zapytać, bo pani Angela...
I'd like to ask you a question, Madam. Ms. Merkel committed a huge error.
Translation? Do you have translation? Okay. Please start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Chciałem zapytać panią, bo...
Yes, I wanted to ask you the question. Chancellor Merkel committed a huge error in the past because she proposed a mechanism to share the burden of immigration in 2005, and that idea is very popular on other continents, and this is why so many migrants come to Europe. Should we not change tack? Because we need to inform people, migrants in their countries, that there's no legal route to Europe, not in that way anyway.
Tack så mycket och tack för frågan.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you very much for the question. Yes. Another signal can be sent out, and that is that we need a long-term sustainable migration policy, and those that have the right to asylum, that they be able to apply for that, and that they ought to be treated in a dignified fashion. It's important for all parties that they all negotiate effectively so that we have, once again, a long-term sustainable policy respecting human dignity.
Our next speaker is Mr. Angel Jambatski.
Illegal migration, colleagues, means crossing illegally state borders, and this means breaking the law. And I'm astonished that the left part of the chamber calls for support of breaking the law, of breaking the state borders. Your support for the state-owned organizations means support to organized crime and support to people who are violating the law. This position is contradictory, ladies and gentlemen. You stand for supremacy of the law, but you actually provoke violating the law. And deaths of people mean nothing to you unless you gain political profit. Thank you.
Wir kommen nun zum Catch the Eye.
This brings us on to Catch the Eye. I have a request from various political groups, 8 in total. And I will accept all 8, as long as you stick to the speaking time, starting with Tomislav Stokol, please.
Hvala lijepa.
Thank you. In the attempt to reach Europe since 2015, over 25,000 people died or gone missing at the sea. Lots of migrants paid traffickers in order to reach Europe. For criminal networks, this is quite profitable. For example, in 2015, it is estimated that 3 to 6 million euros were gained by the criminal networks. However, in order to address humanitarian disasters of people drowning, rescue operations are not enough. We need to have a joint European response, and we also need to increase our cooperation with third countries in order to deal with this issue at the source. The EU does not have the duty to receive all those who want to come to our continent only because the living standard is better here than in their countries. At the same time, we cannot just ignore the deaths of thousands of people who couldn't reach Europe in a legal way.
Gracias, presidente. Querida comisaria.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now, 30 deaths on Sunday. And then in Calabria, we've had a number as well, thousands last year. These are not just figures, but what Madam Metsola said, we cannot tolerate this in the future. So how many more deaths actually do we need? How much more time are we going to have to wait until a binding mechanism is in place? Let's not forget the Sophia mechanism that saved many. I think indeed we have to transcend the horrible narrative of hate of the extreme right. Ladies and gentlemen of the right, is there any drop of humanity in you to work together for a fight against mafia, a mafia against criminal circles, against traffickers, and working in order to ameliorate the situation in places of origin?
In the recent shipwreck, the Italian authorities refused to help, and the responsible Libyan authorities did not help, despite having received both patrol boats and millions of euros from the European community. This is why we need to revoke the Libyan search and rescue area, and we need to have EU state-led search and rescue. We cannot delegate the responsibility of refugees at the EU borders to other states. We need to make sure that we have legal pathways both for refugees and for migrants to the EU. This is the only solution to stop people from dying at the European borders. Our member states need to take the responsibility for helping refugees at the borders of the EU. We need to have proper partnerships with trustworthy countries so that we can receive migrants and refugees properly and dignified, and so that we can also send back the migrants who try to come to Europe under the guise of being refugees. Thank you.
Thank you. Madame Ana Miranda.
No hay peor muro que el muro de la deshumanidad.
There's no bigger wall than that of dehumanization. And we've seen that, the lack of solidarity in human. It's a shame and a scandal. We're here in the European Parliament talking about this tragedy, the deaths, the lack of legal ways of humanitarian corridors, of safe methods to get here. And how shameful is it to hear from the right and the extreme right in this chamber, the Italian extreme right and the Spanish extreme right, demonizing NGOs who are the only people saving lives at sea, in European seas. We're hearing racist, hateful and xenophobic speeches, speeches that should not be accepted in a parliament such as this one. Colleagues, there is no wall that can keep out the despair, that can prevent people from wanting to seek a better life. We shouldn't be talking about numbers or photographs of dead bodies. We're talking about people in their human condition, whatever that may be. Thank you.
Thank you. Madame Sardonet Silvia.
Siete degli ipocriti.
You are hypocrites. This is the responsibility of the European Union, the sole responsibility. And the policies that have been adopted or failed to have been adopted have led to increased arrivals to the European Union. This has been a terrible burden, a burden for European citizens, a tragedy for migrants as well. You speak about humanity. So you just leave Italy all alone with all that responsibility. 7 billion euro have been passed over to Erdogan, and the disembarkations continue from Turkey. People continue to leave that country. We've become ridiculous. There's no European policy whatsoever, and nobody wants economic migrants. So enough of that propaganda with regard to solidarity and working in a concerted fashion. We have to be serious at this point. So this particular rhetoric and hypocrisy with all of these, death at sea, how do you really actually sleep at night?
Wallace Mick. Thanks very much, President. We're talking about 26,000 lives lost in the Mediterranean. And that's just the number of bodies recovered. God knows what the real figure is. This is not just a tragedy, it is a preventable tragedy. This humanitarian crisis has been created by neglectful and inhumane policies, member state border pushbacks, and the creation of Frontex, who have carried out further illegal pushbacks and have been complicit in severe human rights violations. Migrants desperately need safe legal pathways, not arbitrary criminalisation for risking their lives in treacherous conditions for a better future. Remember, there's many MEPs in here voted for these migrants to drown at sea. Has it dawned on them that maybe these migrants want to leave the jungle and go to the garden of Europe because we are doing untold damage to the jungle with our wars and our financial imperialism? Wake up.
Danke, Frau de Leclerc.
Thanks, President. This debate is happening against the backdrop of the deaths of 74 people off the coast of Italy last month. Half of the dead were children, 30 are still missing. It's against the backdrop of the ongoing criminal trials of rescue workers and innocent refugees for helping people to safety. It's against the backdrop of the new Italian regulations that tighten the noose around the civilian search and rescue operations who've stepped into the breach since the EU shamefully walked away from its legal obligations to save lives at sea. It's against the backdrop of illegal pushbacks, violence, torture and thousands of deaths. It's against the backdrop of Gary Lineker being suspended from his job as a broadcaster for expressing solidarity with refugees. My God, what a grim backdrop. So can we please get real and change the narrative? The people coming to the EU from outside its borders are an asset, not a threat. Europe can wake up to that fact or stay in its savage and ever more authoritarian death trap. I hope for the first, but fear for the second.
Danke. Last but not least, Frau Herzberger, Fofana Piret.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Humanitarian assistance is being criminalised. The Italian government has adopted a law which restricts rescue operations and proposes informing the authorities. NGOs won't have the time to save people in the sea. How many more tragedies will we need to see? How many more bodies will we need to see on our beaches at the borders of Europe? This situation needs specific measures from the European Union. We need to increase the capacities for the authorities to patrol, and we need to have humanitarian visas as well to allow asylum seekers to come to Europe safely. Europe needs to show solidarity and save lives in line with our values and human dignity. Thank you.
Für die Kommission.
Thank you. Now for the Commission now, I would like to invite Commissioner Mairead McGuinness to take the floor. Thank you.
Danke, Herr President. Good evening, colleagues. Really to just thank the Chamber for putting this debate on your agenda, and I speak obviously on behalf of Commissioner Johansson. I think as we close this debate, we know that this discussion is far from over. People get into small boats and embark on dangerous journeys because there are no legal ways for them to get to Europe. And many of you have expressed the need for safe legal pathways, and that is something that we support. Let's look at the realities of the European Union today. We reckon that in the healthcare area, 2 million professionals are needed. We also know that by 2030, there will be 7 million vacancies in long-term care alone. MEP Daly mentioned that these people are assets. They're human beings with the capacity to contribute. And those who get into boats do it putting their lives at risk because they want something better. I also recall that this is what we call the European Year of Skills. And to tell this House that we are making progress on talent partnerships with key partner countries. We're starting with Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Bangladesh and Pakistan, and we're looking at Nigeria in the near future. Our member states are fully involved, and this is really essential for success. Our first roundtable took place with Bangladesh on March the 1st, with strong interest from Italy and Germany to foster labour mobility, which should include skills development and skills certification. And today, a roundtable meeting is taking place with Pakistan. Just last week, the first global jobs fair for refugee talent was organised in Amman. This work can provide safe avenues and lead to jobs and opportunities. For example, over 100 refugees have been interviewed by potential employers. This is the future. It's in stark contrast to the terrible tragedies at sea. People smugglers, and we have to call them out, people smugglers are to blame for these tragedies. They exploit people's dreams. They turn them into nightmares. These people end up in shipwrecks on the high seas or in airtight vans on the highways. We think about the 18 people found dead in a lorry in Bulgaria, the people drowned near Calabria, left to die, abandoned by smugglers who save their own skins. Colleagues, these tragedies should galvanise us, should forge our determination, steel our resolve to fight the smugglers relentlessly by air, by sea and by land. We have to fight these smugglers as Team Europe and with our partners to do what we can to prevent people from getting into the smugglers' boats, to prevent irregular departures, to work better together to save lives. Next Monday, Commissioner Johansson will meet with African Union Commissioner Samatta, High Commissioner for Refugees Grandi and Director General of the IMO, Antonio Vittori. And this is done in our trialogue task force on Libya. And the idea behind this is to prepare our high-level dialogue with Libyan authorities. And we have three key objectives: protecting the most vulnerable people in detention centres, including women and children, fighting smuggling and protecting victims, stepping up on returns, evacuations through the emergency transit mechanism, resettlement and reintegration of migrants. I welcome the interventions today that called for swift progress and adoption of the Pact on Migration and Asylum. I agree it is high time to do that, and I'm encouraged by the good progress made by this House and by the Council. I very much welcome the mandates you will agree on next week. We have a roadmap and we are on the right track. We now need to stay on track. There is a new mood in the Council, a strong will to move forward. So the momentum is there. The time is right for an agreement on this pact. And together, I think we should remember that the objectives are to save lives. The figure was mentioned. I think MEP Wallace mentioned a figure of several thousand human beings whose lives have been lost at sea, and perhaps many more thousands that have not been counted. I think we can address that collectively, Parliament, Council and Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. And let me now give the floor to the Minister, Madam Roosevelt. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President, honourable members, Commissioner. Thank you for this debate. There is no doubt that the situation at our maritime borders must be dealt with in an effective and timely manner in accordance with European and international law. Let me be clear, our priority is to save lives at sea. In this regard, cooperation with third countries can help to prevent irregular departures. The EU has been working together with key partners in North Africa for many years with the aim to strengthen their border management as well as their search and rescue capacities. This has helped to build up capacities for the international protection and migration management in the entire region. These partnerships are also important to strengthen the operational framework in partner countries in response to migrant smugglers. Let me also say once again, and this is a clear message from this debate, that the recurring tragedies at sea remind us that a common European response is the only way forward. We must work together to ensure a functioning, coherent and predictable European migration policy and a whole government approach. As I have already underlined, the Presidency intends to continue facing a global approach to migration based on a balance between solidarity and responsibility. We have the firm will to find a common approach, and we are determined to persuade this commitment. Once again, thank you for the debate and for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. So the debate is closed, and we can move to the next item on our agenda. Commission statement, need for immediate reform of the internal rules of the Commission to ensure transparency and accountability in light of alleged conflict of interests. And I would invite Madam Commissioner McGuinness. You have the floor, please.